on 97.3.
Afternoon. This is the Voters Diary on 97.3 City FM. My name is Abna Nyamechampedu. I'm your host. In 97 days, Ghanaians will be voting in the country's general elections for a president and legislators. On the Voters Diary, we will bring you unbiased analysis and in-depth information to inform your choice of a president or legislator on election day. Now, this will be the 8th election since the 4th Republic, and power has changed between the NDC and MPP. I know you know that by now, but the front runners, we know President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. He is the 5th president of the 4th Republic, and his main contender is the one he succeeded in 2017, John Dramani Mahama of the NDC. He was vice president until the demise of John Atta Mills in July 2012, and subsequently won the elections that year. Now, this year's elections, like many others, are in two folds. We'll have the parliamentary election and the presidential election. And so today, on the Voters Diary, we begin with how Parliament has evolved over the years. How did Ghana's parliament look like in 1992, 1996? We'll travel throughout the journey from 1992 to what we have now. But today we'll focus on 1992 and 1996 here on the Voters Diary. Remember, the show is live on 97.3 City FM. We are also live on a number of affiliates across the country. In the Volta region, there's Holy 98.5 FM at Aplau in Ketu South, Revival FM 99.3 at Tajevu. In the Central region on Bosome 89.1 FM at Kimswedro. In the Bono region, Greener 95.9 FM in Sunyai. We are also in the Ashanti region live on Ajimpa 99.5 FM and on Focus 94.3 FM. My name is Abna Nyamechampedu. To help me do this discussion on the involvement of Parliament is Bernard Avle. He's host of the City Breakfast Show and also the Point of View on City TV, and he's a general manager here. And Nathan Kwao, he heads our research desk at City FM and City TV. You should see the books and the documents in front of them. There are laptops and phones and tablets. Gentlemen, you are welcome to the Voters Diary.
Thank you very much, Abna.
Thank you, Abna.
Let's begin with 1992. 1992 is when the PNDC became the NDC, led by former President Rawlings. But the then opposition NPP boycotted that year's parliamentary polls. Why was that?
Okay, let me do a quick intro on that point you made, and then Nathan will give you the details. So it's important to look at the 92 election from the point of view of the Fourth Republic, because don't forget that after the 1979 elections, which Laliman had won, there was an interruption on 31st December to bring in Rawlings with the PNDC. So there was an interruption of our democratic experience in the Third Republic, the shortest lived of the republics, led by Hilal Liman. So before you can understand the boycott, you need to understand that the whole clamor for democracy started with a lot of things. Edu Bahim was giving his lectures. There were lots of agitations on university campuses, and I was a student at University Primary School, and I could see some of those things. Then you had the culmination of the assembly that they formed, Constituency Assembly, to come up with a constitution. Then there was a referendum. I remember in those days there was a shoe my brother bought called Referendum, because the shoe came out in 91, where we were sort of educated to vote yes for the constitution.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of people say the problem with our constitution today is that because if you read Ahoy's book, you read about Samuel's book, a lot of them realized that where the world was headed the Berlin Wall had fallen,
Cold War had ended.
And the kinds of things that the PNDC believed in, the world had changed, and therefore they needed to do a constitution that would secure the comfort of the military leadership. So it's very presidential, top heavy. All right. So that was the context around the transition into the 92 system. And you had a small parliament in 79, 140 people, but the new constitution also came with some redemarcations. So almost all the regions had new. Indeed, between 79 and 92, there were 9 regions in Ghana. So it was later on that the Upper East and Upper West region were separated. So those are some of the things you need to know by way of context. So in terms of the boycott, this was the first time a military ruler who had been in power at the time from, if you want, 81 to 91, 10 or 11 years, was going to be contested. Now, there was a lot of fear and intimidation, and there was a lot of lack of clarity. The 79 election had been won by the PNP, led by Hilal Liman, and a lot of people felt that if the UNC hadn't split from the PFP, they were the right-sided parties. The presidential votes they got would have won them the election. So that was the context. So this was the first time you had an election which didn't feature an Nkrumah-ist group versus a UP or PP group, because 92 Rawlings had coming, and the NDC, if you look at the PNDC becoming NDC, J.H. Uswe Champong, Obeda Samoa, Yao Kwekuban, a lot of these people who were in the PNDC were actually from the UP tradition. Yes. So this was the context, okay? That's how come you had the kinds of things that happened in the lead up to the election itself. And then I would say the 92 election created the modern fault lines for Ghana's electoral map. Although you could say that the 51 and later on the first election that brought Nkrumah to power sowed the seeds for the political left versus right, it was really the 92 election that began to carve out what we see today as an electoral map that you can call Nathan and say, Nathan, what's going to happen in this region? He'll tell you because the seeds were sown here.
So, Nathan, let's talk about what then the parliament became, the makeup of the 1992 parliament.
Well, yeah, I mean, after the election was done, and let's not forget to add that the MPP, the main opposition party, did not contest the parliamentary elections. They were protesting the results of the presidential election. Remember, they came out with the stolen verdict. They had some other parties going along with them. So a lot of the other parties did not take part. So that's the context people need to know about the 92 parliament. First, you had a speaker who was Justice D.F. Annan. He had been part of the PNDC furniture for a bit. And then you had the parliament was made up of 200 seats. So there were 200 parliamentarians in the August House. The NDC had 189 seats. So it was a large majority. The NDC, which was formed out of the PNDC, they had 189 seats. The NCP had 8 seats. The Eagle Party had 1 seat. And the independent candidates won 2 seats. So if you add the numbers, you get 200. The NDC 189, the NCP 8, the Eagle Party had 1, and the independent candidate won 2 seats in that parliament. So that was how the House looked like on the 7th of January 1993, when the first parliament of the Fourth Republic was just about to begin. There were 200 of them, and I've laid out who had what heading into the first bit of parliamentary business.
And so the NDC had majority, of course. Who are the personalities in this parliament?
Well, I just wanted to make a quick comment about part of the reasons why the NPP felt there was a stolen verdict. Now, as I said, from 79 to 91, 92, this was the PNDC in power. So there were lots of agitations, several coup attempts which didn't succeed. So there's a lot of suspicion between the government and the opposition parties. Now, people like J. Kufuor, who was an MP in 1969 and an MP also in the 79 parliament.
And part of the PNDC as a secretary.
Exactly. Then you also had people like Kojo Mpianim and things. So there were people who had seen various coup d'etats. Now, there were 2 or 3 key issues around the election. The issue of the ballot box, whether it should be transparent or not.
Okay.
And the issue of the type of voter ID to use, whether there will be a photo ID or a thumbprint ID. These were some of the issues that the opposition felt that if they were not properly cleared, they would not stand a chance in the election. And I think they were right, because if you look at the presidential results, Rawlings literally swept the election. You can't blame them. You haven't had proper elections since 1979. Political party activity had been banned. So you having no grassroots mobilization. Lots of the meetings were held in clubhouses. All right. So if you look at the MPP and a lot of the senior people in MPP, when you interview them and ask them about their their track record in the party, they tell you that, well, this meeting happened in my house. So these were clubs because they couldn't do political activities. So Nana Akufo-Addo, Akmano Uswajiman, Dr. Safwedu, Kofi Kunedo Apreku, and all these people, BJ Darocha, Jan Selby, they were intellectuals, but they also men of property. Okay, Peter Lajete, Samuel Odwe-Sykes, and co. So these people wanted to use law. In fact, the parliament, the reason a lot of people feel that the NPP shouldn't have boycotted the 92 election was that a lot of the development of our democracy happened through parliamentary advocacy, led by the minority, the Nana Akufo-Addos and all these people, J.H. Menses, who in the 96 parliament really showed how a parliament should run. So a lot of the rules around the elections would be fought in parliament. So even though people say our parliament is a rubber stamp parliament, they approve everything, if you look at constitutional history, a lot of the changes, particularly on electoral issues, either J.H. Mensah will go to court, the MPP itself will go to court, or the people in parliament will raise certain specific objections to pave the way to make it easier for the elections to be fairer. So this was the context behind which the 92 boycott happened. And I think in retrospect, MPP oughtn't have boycotted that election because by 96, where they had about a third of the seats, if they had run the 92 election, they would have had a chance to market their candidate, they would have understood the dynamics of parliament, and they would have probably performed better in 96. But that's just hindsight. It's always 2020. So this is the context. So as you were talking about big names, and I think Nathan has those.
Well, yeah, there were some very popular names. Cletus Avoka, for example, he was in that parliament as well. The NDC's Johnson Asiedu Nketia was there. And a lot of people do not know. Some know, but some people don't know. Now Johnson Asiedu Nketia has been part of this country's political architecture in the Fourth Republic for many years, from the bottom straight to the top. He was MP. He was also entering the House for the first time from Wenchi West. Then you had other people like Alban Badbing. He entered the 92 Parliament for MP as Nadoli.
He's still
North.
there.
He's
He'll
still
be
around.
exiting this year.
And one name these days we associate with Labour politics, Austin Game. He was in that parliament as well as MP for North Tongue. Dan Abudaki was there. MP for Keta. Edward Doaja, who also got his place in parliament as MP for Aveno. You had the late squadron leader Clint Sowu for Anglon, Commodore Steve Obimpe Bernard, and he was part of the PNDC.
Yeah.
And so you had some members of the PNDC also contesting some of the parliamentary seats. Hawa Yakubu also went in parliament as an independent candidate. She was in the Upper East. The Eagle Party's Orekwa Mofa, who later got a position many years down the line in the NDC government, was there.
He was the parliamentarian for the...
He was for the Eagle Party. Yes, he was a Buakwa.
Which is essentially Chebi.
Yes.
So Orekwa Mofa then became the first Fourth Republic parliamentarian for that constituency.
Then you had people like Mohammed Ibn Chambers also there as MP for Bimbila. Ama Benyuado got into parliament in 92. She was part of the people who won seats in the central region for Gomwa West in the NDC. So all these people made up, or they were part of the NDC's 189 seats, of course, the exception, the Eagle Party, so Rekwa Mofa. Hawa Yakubu, she came in as an independent candidate in the Upper East region.
Hawa Yakubu Ogede.
Yeah, strong woman. So those were the people, those were some of the names who were there.
Don't forget that there had been some alliance.
Yes,
between the
NDC, the Eagle Party,
yes, and the NCP. So even though technically they could be considered minority, going into the parliament, you could say they were from the same side.
Okay.
But as parliamentary discourse would evolve, you would notice that some of them took principled positions. People like Hawa Yakubu. In fact, I've interviewed Clenso, who used to say that she was the one woman opposition to a parliament that was essentially thinking the same way. So even though they sort of in the presidential election supported Rawlings, once they got into parliament, you'd notice that they had different views on certain things because the NCP were decidedly Nkrumahist, right? More so than the NDC, which is like an agglomeration of various groups. The other quick point was that even though if you look at the longest serving members of parliament in Ghana, they are always from the NDC side because of this 92 issue.
Yeah.
Now, there are some interesting people who did not run for the parliamentary poll, although they had been penciled and some had even won primaries. Yeah. So people like Albert Kandapa, and if you look at the presidential result in 92, it is very clear that these people would have won their seats for the NPP if they had run.
Because the Ashanti region is the only one Buzia won.
So people like Kojo Banredu
yes.
Yeah.
So Albert Kandapa, for example, for Efija Setre West.
Okay.
Balado Menu was very popular in the 2008-2012 parliament. He's no longer that popular. Balado Menu, also from MPP side, did not contest. This was the boycott side. Just some names. Richard Anane was lined for Bantama, did not contest. Kojo Banredu Asante Akim North did not contest. Idodo Sekweku, a former deputy minister of sports who died, was Kwame Adokufo Menchia. He was penciled. He probably would have won. Kwame Osei Prempeh, Insuta Kwaman, also penciled by the MPP, did not run. Kofi Kunodo Apreku, Ofinso North, SK Boafo, Subin. In the eastern region, you have people like Kwejo Ejei Daku. These are very prominent names. Dominic Fobi, he had been lined up for 92. He did not run. Christine Church at Cape Coast. Okay, C.O. Nyano, Upper Dintra. Nana Akufo-Addo himself, for Ebuakwa South, Ejari Koelabi, and Francis Wafo-Mensah. All these people may have been in the Parliament of 92. So if you want to look at political contemporaries, you can't say, for example, that Bagbin is senior to Nanado, or that Doa Jaho is senior to, say, Albert Kandapa. It's because of the boycott. Okay, so because these were contemporaries, but because they didn't go, so for 4 years they were doing opposition politics from outside Parliament, which was why the courts became very prominent. So if you notice, between 92 and 96, a lot of court cases, they realized that they couldn't get into the third arm, the second arm of government. So they used the third arm of government.
And the advocacy was done outside. Remember Kumi Preku? Yes. Just around that
for the VAT.
For VAT and all of that. Now, one other thing, as I dug, I discovered. Now, when the former MP Ken Jirasa, in the 92 elections, he contested as MP for Ayawa West Worgon.
Yes.
And then later down the line, he went to the Volta region. So when he got into Parliament, he was MP for Ayawa West Worgon, and then later became MP for one of
In fact, there are a number of NDC parliamentarians in 92 who lost outright in 96. It was because of the no contest. A lot of the Ashanti people lost.
Yes.
Indeed, the NDC itself changed about a third of the candidates because I think they realized that these 92 people were just people who were put in there as placeholders. So in 96, they had to change internally some of their candidates. Before then, the electorate also rejected some of them for the MPP to get a 1/3 of the
We'll be
results.
coming into 96 shortly. If you just joined us, this is the Voters Diary on 97.3 City FM. My name is Abnam, here with Bernard and Nathan. You can join us with your views via our WhatsApp line 0549 986 996. 0549 986 996. We've spoken about the key personalities and some people who are still in Parliament and all that. But what was the gender picture like?
Oh Lord.
It was a male-dominated Parliament. Now, out of the 200 seats, 184 were men. 184 went to men, sorry. And there were 16 female MPs. Now, if you look at the breakdown, Ashanti had 4 of the women. Brongahafo had 2. Central 3, Eastern 1, Greater Accra 2, Upper East 1, who was Hawa Yakubu. Volta had 1, and Western had 2.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you some more prominent names because, yes, Hawa Yakubu was a very prominent woman in Boko. Okay, but there were some other interesting names. Like, as Nathan has said, Asiedun Ketia was in the 92 Parliament.
Yes.
He will later become Deputy Agric Minister. Collins Dauda.
Yes, he was also in there.
Collins Dauda Isutifi South was in that Parliament. J.H. Osei Champon, who was in the 1979 Parliament, he's one of the most prominent Ashantis in the NDC. Osei Champon was initially on the other side. He was not really an Nkrumahist. So if you look at the 1979 Parliament, J.H. Osei Champon was a prominent figure even at the time. Together people like Harry Sawyer and Odwe Sykes. Osei Champon was in the PFP. That's Victor Usu's party. And he's found himself in the NDC. And he became a majority leader, an Ashanti regional chairman, a very prominent person in the NDC. Names like, what do you call it? Kojo Yanka, the founder of
AUCC.
Yes.
He was in Parliament twice for Agona East. Now his brother, Kwesi, is now going for Agona East MPP. But he has a 2-term and a deputy minister at the time. Other names like Ama Benyiwado, Gomwa West in the 92 Parliament, Atukwashi, KEEA, very prominent person in the 92 Parliament. Samoni Amadonko, quick one of the most admired Rawlings ministers. He actually came from the NCP.
One of the parties.
Because of the alliance.
So he's an Nkrumahist. And then Orico Amofa was on the Eagle Party ticket. Samuel Salas Mensah, he wrote a book. He was for many years in charge of the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Upper West Akim in that. Now, another big name in NDC, D.S. Boating. If you read most of the books, Obeda Samuel's book, Ahoy's book, D.S. Boating was MP for, now they call it Joabin, but it was Koforidia at the time. Vida Yeboah, Ekwapim South, also a deputy minister at the time. Alhaji Sinari, who later became Ghana's ambassador to Egypt or Saudi Arabia, I think. I also Central MP. And as Nathan mentioned, there was also some other interesting names. Mike Gizo, 3-term MP, later became
former
Greater Accra Minister. Yes, Shai Osudoku, Ni Ajeboy Sekan, Lejokuku 2-term. He's the mentor of Sylvester Mensah. If you read Sylvester Mensah's book, he's there. Ibn Chambers was in that parliament. So even though it was a one-sided parliament, there were some very strong names there. B.F. Husseini, not to be confused with A.B.F. Husseini. B.F. Husseini in that parliament for Gupegu Sabongida. Then there was a few names. John Tia, later minister under Mills. He was in that parliament. Dominica Zuma, Cletus Avoka. In fact, the three wise men, Bagbin, Avoka, E.T. Mensah, were all in the 92 parliament under Mills.
I think E.T. Mensah came in 96.
96, so there was Cletus Avoka.
Yes.
There was
Alban Bagbin.
And there's a third name I'll try and remember on the NDC side. I think it was Yele Chire, or I don't remember. Then, of course, some other interesting names in the Volta region side. Kofi Ato, Dana Bodakpi, Modestus Ahiable, Stephen Obimpe, and Stephen Akoli. And then there was John Frank Abu.
For which constituency?
Western region. John Frank Abu was a Memphis Central. And then, of course, again, a very interesting person who is very close, in fact, to the current Ghana ambassador to the UK, Papa Osei. He's in the person of Albert Bosomtwi-Sam. In fact, if the MPP had contested 92, it would have pitched two very good friends against each other, because Albert Bosomtwi-Sam was a partner in a law firm with his friend Papa Osei. Bosomtwi was NDC, Papa Osei was MPP.
Would have been an interesting race.
Those are some of the... So the 92 parliament was really the training ground for some of our very prominent names in our politics today. So... And I'm sure when we come to 96, it's interesting that John Mahama and Akufo-Addo both entered parliament in 96.
Let's get into 96 then. Let's get into 96.
So 96, the context was that the MPP now had decided to take part in the parliamentary elections. And like Bernard said, because they had so many heavyweights and so many great people intellectually and politically, once they entered the race, the dynamics changed a lot in parliament. Now, the NDC still won the majority, but they had 133 seats. They lost 55 or 56 seats. The MPP had 61 seats. The PCP had 5. The PNC had 1. Now, this is where, if you notice carefully, this is where parliamentary presence of the smaller parties started to wane. Because apart from the PNC that had 1, the NCP 0, Ego Party 0, DPP 0, Independent 0. So there was no independent candidates in the 96 parliament. So a lot of people need to pay attention to that 96
And the PNC had only 1.
Had only 1.
Who's this?
That was up north. I'll get you that.
Okay.
It's either a Pasera or I'll get it.
Yes, it was in the northern region. Northern region. So if you look at that, for example, once the MPP entered the race, the NDC struggled in the Ashanti region. The NDC won only 5 of 33 seats in the Ashanti region, and the MPP won 28. Now, part of that 28 were names like Osei Mensah Bonsu. It was his first time in parliament, MP for Old Tafo Swami.
At the time, Tafo and Swami were one constituency.
Together.
Yes.
Because later you'll be talking to the Tafo MP.
Old Tafo MP,
So
yeah.
Kwame Adokufo came in as MP for Menchia. Kofi Kunedo Apreku was MP for Finsu North. If you go to the Brong Ahafo region, for example, the MPP had the likes of J.H. Mensah. He got into parliament for the first time as MP for Sunyani East. Johnson Asiedun Kentia kept his place as MP for Winchi West. Collins Dada the same for Esutifi South. J.H. Owuswe Champon also stayed there. So in the Brong Ahafo region, NDC had 17 out of the 21 seats. In the central region, the NDC won 14 of 17 seats, including Kojoyanka, like Bernard mentioned, Aguna East. Ama Benyuado came back for Gomwa West. And the MPP had the likes of Christine Churcher, MP for Cape Coast, making her first entry, and Isaac Edumadze. How many people remember him? Who was one-time Central Region Minister. He was representing Esukuma Inyane Siam. In the Eastern region, the NDC won 15 of 26 seats. They had people like Michael Tenyauno getting into parliament for the first time.
MTN.
Yes, MTN, Lower Manya. And the MPP won 11 seats. So that was where the likes of Nana Akufo-Addo came in, Yawasafo Mafo, Hackman Oswajiman, and co. In the Greater Accra region, the NDC won 13 of 22 seats. So my Gizo for Shao Sudoku, he maintained his seat. E.T. Mensah was making his first entry into parliament as MP for Ningo Pram Pram. Sylvester Mensah also got into parliament as MP for Ladade Kotopom. Whilst the MPPs, Kwamina Bartels for Ablekuma North, Teresa Mele Tego, she was also there, Ablekuma South. Sheikh I.C. Kwe got into parliament for the first time in 1996, Ayasu Central. And Nana Kumia was also in there as MP for Okaikwe.
So in the Greater Accra side, again, if you look at MPP politics in Greater Accra, people like Kwamina Bartels are very big. Quick point, Kwamina Bartels won the 96 for Ablekuma North, but in 92 he ran for Aguna West.
Okay.
He was to run.
He was to run,
But they
but he
boycotted.
It didn't happen.
And then he went in. Then he mentions Ishmael Ashite Tema East, who's still the MPP chairman.
Yeah.
He came into parliament in 96 under the NPP. Then, of course, Teresa Tegu for many years was holding the fort for NPP in a very difficult place. Now, Ablekuma West and South were together at the time.
Okay.
So Chokod and Suman were together. So Teresa Tegu holding that seat. Now it's been split into two. NDC has the South, which is
Yeah.
Chenche, and MPP has the West, which is Esla.
Esla, yeah.
But for a long time, Ablekuma South was... So if you look at Teresa Tegu, IC Kwe, I think, and Nana Kumia and Bartels, these were and of Ismail Ashite, these are like the prominent people helping the MPP in Accra before the 2000 shift. Because in 2000, a lot of the NDC people lost. Just want to make a quick point on what Nathan said about the smaller parties. So if you look at Ghana, there's something we call the duopolization of Ghana politics, where you have NDC, MPP increasing their role and the smaller parties diminishing. 92 for presidential had 11% for the non-NDC MPP group, led
Okay.
by Hila Liman. Okay, so that election, Dr. Liman had almost 11% of the result. In the 96 election, Edward Mahama, funny, there were only 3 candidates on that ballot, John Kufuor, Rawlings, and Mahama. Edward Mahama had only 3%. So, of course, we can say that Liman, being a former president, had name recognition. So, from 79 to 92, he had almost 10% of the ballot. But from 96, of course, 2000 was an aberration. The smaller parties were many, so they got about 7%. But it's been dwindling since 2004, 2.9%, lower than Mahama's 3%, Edward. 2008, also 3%, comes down to 1.6 in 2012, 2016, 1.7. So if you look at the scale, it's really trending downwards. And if you look at the fact that as we speak, PNC haven't chosen a presidential candidate, CPP only chose theirs last week. I fear for our smaller parties, but that's a different point.
I'd like you to touch on the politics around the 1996 election. 1992, there was a lot of mistrust. Did it improve?
Well, as I said, there were a lot of landmark issues around who could contest and who could do what. And the minority, before even they got into parliament, there were some important agitations for the type of voter register to have, the type of ballot box to use, where transparent ballot boxes were brought in. Because imagine if you have a ballot box that is opaque. It can
Or have stamped ballots in there.
And then there was clamor for the photo ID as well.
So
these are some of the things that the opposition fought in court. So a lot of people say MPP is a party of lawyers and businessmen. It's true in a sense, because for this Fourth Republic, what they could not do in the 92 parliament, they had to do in the courts. So their leaders were very prominent, which is why people like Nana Akufo-Addo became prominent. So look at the NPP leadership, whether it's Ala Jete, whether it's Odoi Sykes, whether it's Kufuor or Nana Akufo-Addo. Of course, there was J.H. Mensah, who was the economic master. But almost all of their prominent people, so they're economists or lawyers or doctors. And the lawyers played a very key role, because it was legal advocacy they used to level because indeed the PNDC had very formidable minds. I mean, Obeda Asamoah was an institution. He taught people like Mills, but Obeda Asamoah taught everybody. And this was the person who was both foreign minister and attorney general. Rawlings himself was a very feared military leader with some very smart people around him. So the MPP had to really do legal advocacy to get their way to level the playing field, to allow them to do well in the 96 election. And then you have some of the names Nathan was mentioning, in the names like Mukhtar Bamba, also won in 96, Wenchi East, and of course Asedun Kitias Wenchi West. So it's very interesting the role of BA in some of these things. Isaac Dumas' entry into parliament was in 96 as well. Those of you who know a bit of Ghana politics, you know him. In terms of your women, Amma Benyuado was there, still there. Comfort Ousu from Fantiman East, also a prominent woman in parliament. Grace Coleman, Deputy Finance Minister under Kufuor. Ifidiasi Asokore, very interesting. She also was in parliament as a debutant in 96. So 96 had really, and a lot of the political historians said that 96 parliament was one of the most exciting for anybody covering parliament. I was in secondary school at the time, but I used to hear the debates, because I feel the role of minority leader and opposition was defined by J.H. Mensah and Nana Akufo-Addo, Yao Safo-Mafo, Kofi Kunedo Apreku, Michael Kwe and Co. These are the people that I'm sure people like Haruna Idrisu and Co. look up to, because we were in, I'm sure Haruna Adams were in the university at the time. These were the people who were really taking on. In fact, if you read Obert's book, Obert said one of the reasons why he supported the transition from Kwabena J to Alban Babin was that he felt that the MPP minority were becoming, because NDC had people who were both in government and in parliament. NDC was suffering in the 96 parliament. So he said he thought they should transition to more young people like Bagbin, because he felt that the Kwabena Jays and co of the old guard could not meet the ferocity of the MPP side, which is why they brought in their fresh legal guys in, and indeed that's left to some rifts in the party and things. Obed has a whole chapter on that, so you can read it for yourself. But it's very interesting that a lot of the people in MPP who are hailed today, it was a 96 parliament that my generation actually saw them perform first, and it was a sight to behold.
Wow. Bernard mentioned he mentioned prominent women, so that kind of leads you to the breakdown.
Okay.
So in the 92 parliament there were 16 female MPs. In the 92 we got a little better. There were 18 female MPs. 6 of them were incumbent. So 6 or a third of that number had kept their seat from 92. Ashanti had 2 of them. Brongahafo had 3, Central 4, Eastern 1, Greater Accra 4, Northern 2, Upper East 1, and Western had 1 female MP. So the Greater Accra had the highest number of female MPs, 4, followed by Brongahafo 3. Ashanti and Northern had 2, with Upper East and Western.
And the Greater Accra names, Rebecca Adote, again, small history. I also was gone. A lot of people at the time felt that, in fact, there was a court case because the Judge Isaac Amu of the MPP actually had been declared winner after a court case, but Rebecca Adote was the MP. By the time the court case had finished, she had finished the term. So in the year 2000 in Investi, there was a lot of sympathy support for Isaac Amu for MPP because they felt he had been robbed in 96. So he was one of the 4 women. There was Teresa Tego, as he mentioned as well, very prominent woman in the NPP, also MP for Ablekuma South. And then there were some other interesting people like Vida Yeboah in the Eastern region. She was an MP for Ekwapim South. She was a minister or deputy minister at the time. There was Ama Benyuado Comforto Usu as well. And of course, there was a Teresa Kufuor, not to be confused with the wife of J. A new Edubiase MP for NDC for 1996.
Okay. Let's hear from our listeners before I wrap up with you, gentlemen. Kennedy Chumasi from Dansoman says, concrete and detailed history of our elections in Ghana. I'm really learning a lot. Thank you for tuning in. Asaba Ibrahim from Zebila. Cletus Avaka is still running on the ticket of the NDC in Zebila, but we are going to retire him from politics this year to give way to the young ones. Kwesi Asan in Tema. Hello, Abna. Already enjoying the analysis being made by Bernard and Nathan. It's amazing how Adukufor, who was quite prominent in the beginning of this current republic, and we hardly hear from him these days. He was at the MPP's manifesto.
There's a generation of politicians who are all around 80. Kufuor himself, Kwame Pienim, even Ivada Damensa, the people Samen's interviewed. Those people have really paid their dues. And a lot of them, they were most prominent between 96 and 2004. They voluntarily decided not to go. Quick correction. So Ashite is the regional chairman of MPP. Regional chairman, not the Greater Accra regional. Regional minister. Yes, Ismail Ashite. So there are 2 Ashites. There's one who's former MP for Clote Colley, who's NDC. But not to be confused with the Ishmael.
No, he's Tema.
The Ishmael is the Tema. He's the Tema Colossus. the Ashites are actually from Tema.
Okay.
So if you check the history of Tema, a lot of prominent politicians who worked there are from the Ashite family. And Ishmael Ashite was a quintessential one, and he was the MP for NPP for Tema in 96.
Let me pick more messages. Sensei from Nsawem says, I'm really learning a lot from the program and enjoying the voters' diary. Thank you. Abna, congratulations to you and the entire team. Wonderful analysis. That's from Dekadi in Spintex. Thomas Citizen in Amasaman. I really love the program already. It's very educative and I'm learning a lot. But I want to know from you, does it mean that one can decide to stand for an independent parliamentary candidate as long as he can?
Oh, yes, you can. Just that this is very difficult. I just want to wrap up quickly by making a few points. Again, in the 96 parliament, there were some very interesting young politicians. So Sylvester Mensah and Nana Kumia were the 2 youngest. Sylvester Mensah that they could upon NDC, Nana Kumia, also in Greater Accra, Okankwe South. They were, I think, in their 30s. They were quite prominent in that parliament. E.T. Mensah, Okanja Adamafio, later Interior Minister, was Ododo MP. David Lamte, founder of XYZ, very, very enterprising businessman. There was an interesting race in the 96 election where there was an independent candidate called Tei Okuno. He got 17,000 votes in this constituency. He was running TV adverts, but still David Lamte beat him. for the NDC. So David Amte was NDC in 96, and then he switched eventually. And of course, there was people like Margaret Clark Kwesi, also in that parliament. And then Ofosuan Pofo of Fantiakwa was also in the 96 parliament.
Yes, he made his entry.
Yes, and then as I mentioned, Salas Mensah. In the Eastern region, there was Yao Safo Mafo, Owusu Japan, later parliamentary leader, Yao Berima of Jabin, Hackman Owusu Ajimine, and Kwabena Edusei Ketri, who still tried to go to parliament.
It didn't work so well.
He was in
It
parliament
didn't
in
work so well for him this time around. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's our dive into the 1992 and 1996 parliaments. We have more from how Parliament has evolved for you. We'll continue tomorrow with the 2000 and 2004 elections. Thank you very much, Bernard Avler and Nathan Kwao. This is the Voters Diary on 97.3 City FM. My name is Abnanya Mishampedu. The program is also live on our affiliates. In the Central Region is Bosome 89.1 FM, Akim Swedro. Bono Region, Guina 95.9 FM in Sunyai. We also live in the Ashanti Region, Ajimpa 99.9 FM and Focus FM 94.3 on KNUST campus, all in Kumasi. In the Volta Region, we are live on Holy 98.5 FM in Aplau, K2 South, and Revival FM 99.3 at Tejevu. Now, we've been talking about Parliament, and there are some people we call the experienced hands. Those people will not be returning to the August House in 2021. Some of them, I should say. And one of such persons is Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei. He's the MP for Old Tafo, who also doubles as the Minister for Monitoring and Evaluation. We have a brief report. Take a listen.
I started by saying that I'm a bit sad today because all of us are members of this House. And anything we do here should reflect all of us, the way we conduct business here. So, Speaker, as you rightly indicated, a member has made a statement. It is his opinion. Clearly, if you disagree, you give points to disagree. But when you start making statements like "President has been set," you are deceiving the public and the House.
Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei has retained the Old Tafo seat since he entered in 2004. Prior to the 2004 elections, he was a special advisor to the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning and later a Deputy Minister of the same ministry in 2003. While many first-term MPs are noted of contributing little to the works of Parliament, Dr. Akoto Osei was an exception. James Kluche Avaji, who entered Parliament the same year with Dr. Akoto Osei, remembers him of actively being involved in the works of the House.
Yeah, I think when he came, even though people who entered Parliament the first year are considered to be backbenchers, I can say or confirm that he wasn't a full backbencher at the time. He entered Parliament when President Kufuor was serving his second term, but he was then working at the NDPC, National Development Planning Commission. So it's like he has vast experience in policy making or policy development.
Following the demise of his former boss, Kojo Banredu, Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei was appointed Minister of Finance by former President John Agyekum Kufuor after the NPP retained power in 2004, a position he held until the 2008 elections. As an economist, his performance as a minister and member of parliament has been acknowledged by compatriots across political divides.
His performance also on the floor of parliament when it comes to economic issues is something that parliament is also going to miss. His contribution in those regards in terms of advice on what should be done in order to ensure that the country at large benefits is going to remain. But we still have new ones that are joining, definitely, who are also going to contribute.
Even though the NPP lost the 2008 election, Dr. Akoto Osei was maintained as the MP for Old Tafo. He was elected with 36,171 votes out of 47,478 total valid vote cast. He acted as a ranking member of the Finance Committee from 2009 to 2017.
Since March 2013, inflation has been in double digits. It reached 13.2 in November of 2013. In the year 2013, remember that public workers only got a 10% increase in salary, not even enough to catch up with the rate of inflation. And to make matters worse, in the budget statement, the government proposed a freeze on wages. Is this really a manifestation of the Better Ghana agenda?
Within this period, he worked closely with James Aveji, who was the chairman of the Finance Committee in the Set Parliament. He's credited for his works in the passage of the Public Finance Management Act 952/2016 and Petroleum Revenue Management Act. James Klucha Aveji, who is MP for Ketu North, speaks highly of Dr. Akoto Osei's patriotism during deliberations.
The whole country was paramount to us at the time. What I mean by this is that we might have our personal differences when issues come before the committee, but we all look at it in the interest of the country, how beneficial the issue will be to the country. I can remember that most of the time we disagree on issues, but when this happens and there is calm restored back to the committee, within 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes maximum, you see both of us working together again.
When the NPP gained power in 2016, Dr. Akoto Osei was put in charge of a newly created ministry for monitoring, planning, and evaluation. Key of his works as a Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation has been the ranking of government ministries under various performance indicators. He has on several platforms justified the existence of his ministry.
So in that sense, we look for challenges and we find solutions to them. One of the biggest challenges is releasing of money from the Ministry of Finance. Every minister tells me when he or she has requested for money, and the Minister of Finance tells me when she or she has given the money. So we have to track together with them where the bottleneck is, just so they can achieve their results. The emphasis is on achieving the results.
In the build-up to the 2020 polls, Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei has decided to bow out of Parliament, which has resulted in the election of Vincent Sefua, a public relations officer of the Education Ministry, as the NPP parliamentary candidate for the Old Tafo constituency.
So that's our brief about the Honorable Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei. I've been joined by Sami Riafi. He has a lot more on him. Sami, good to have you on the Voters Diary.
Good afternoon, Abena. Well, as you know, he entered Parliament in 2004. It was a newly created constituency, the Old Tafo constituency. It was part of the Old Tafo Swame constituency where Osei Mensah Bonsu, the current majority leader, was the MP. So from this particular constituency, it was divided, and then Doc came to represent the people of the Old Tafo constituency. But before he came to Parliament, he was a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Analysis, SEPA. That was from 1996 to 2001. And when President Kufuor became president, he was appointed as a special advisor to the then Minister of Finance and Economic Planning.
That was in 2000.
Kojo Ba Redu. And then from there, he was appointed a deputy minister in 2003 and later became the Minister of State at the Finance Ministry. Interestingly, in 2004, when he came to Parliament, the primaries that saw him elected to be the representative of the people, he ran that race with the late Sir John Kojo Usefriye in 2004, and then he won to represent the people of the Old Tafo constituency. So,
Sami, you hold on to that. Okay. We'll be getting more of the background information we have on him, but he has joined us on the telephone line, the Honorable Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei. Good afternoon to you, Honorable.
Good afternoon.
We are glad to have you join us on the Voters Diary. You have been in Parliament since 2004? Five? Yes, after the 2004 elections. That's right.
That's correct.
How has the journey been?
How has what?
The journey in Parliament all these years.
It's been very, very fulfilling. I think I've enjoyed my period in Parliament. You know what? Even though I officially went to Parliament in 2005, as a Deputy Minister of Finance in 2003, we were allowed to go and answer questions on behalf of my minister then, who was Osei. So I started going to Parliament in my capacity as Deputy Minister before I became an MP.
And for you, your work in the chamber, what are some of the key things you will be remembered for in the House when it comes to parliamentary work?
I think that I have tried to participate, especially in all committee work, and participate in debates in the chamber. I tried to, especially when I was in opposition, I made sure I was on top of most of the issues. And as a ranking member for the Finance Committee, I think my contribution to parliamentary debates, especially on finance and economic matters, was quite a bit. But I've enjoyed participating in the debates on the floor.
I'm sure you've heard this debate about people like yourself, the Honorable Bagbin, who are not returning to Parliament in 2021, and the fact that it will have a negative impact on the work of the legislature. Do you agree with this assertion?
It is not for me to judge, but I think that there's something in trying to keep some of the old hands around. It helps Parliament in general. I suspect that initially there'll be a little gap, but one of the things I try to do in Parliament was to try also mentor other people to take over after us when we leave. And I think in my case, I can say there are people who are picking up. Yes, but when you don't have the memory of what Parliament is all about, there can be some problems. We need some of the old hands to try and bring some stability to the debate on the floor. These days, I don't enjoy the debate as much as I used to.
Why is that?
Without putting blame on anyone, I think that majority of parliamentarians now don't appear to want to concentrate on parliamentary work. You see, in terms of who is there, who is not there, who is participating in the debate, who is not. I don't see that like when we first went to Parliament. We assumed that if you're an MP, you need to be active, and so. But I don't see that anymore.
But how then do we fix this? Because, of course, people like you cannot be in Parliament forever.
Oh, no. So I think we have to have a way of trying to find a decent way of encouraging some of the old hands to stay by providing them incentives to make it their while. And also insist that MPs do play their role.
But if we incentivize the old hands, how then do we get young people to learn and also to join the country's political scene?
Oh, you can always get young people, but what sense does it make if we let an MP go for one term and be on seat that MP? He or she will not have acquired enough experience to contribute properly. I mean, at the minimum, I think it takes about 2 terms to be familiar with what is going on. And we need to monetize parliamentary seats. It looks like these days, if you have money,
you are guaranteed a space. When we were going to Parliament, we were there with the likes of Tafo, even the current president and J.H. Spencer. When they spoke, everybody was eager to listen. Now, most people don't even care to go to Parliament. There's a lot of absenteeism. Something is missing that needs to be corrected as soon as possible.
I would like you to tell me about your work in Old Tafo briefly. But before that, what would you say is your highest or your lowest moment in Parliament?
Well, I don't know about my highest, but I think anytime parliamentary debate results in insults, then it is a low time for the entire body, not just a person. I think that a debate is a debate. We can agree to disagree, but when insults become more common in Parliament, I have a problem with it. You can make your point without insulting anybody. You have to deal with the facts. These days, people are not as factual as they used to be, and they get away with it. And it didn't used to be the case.
All right.
You have to know your facts when you get up, and you don't use your opinion all the time.
Let's now go to Old Tafo, Honorable. What exactly have you done in the constituency that the people can point and say, Honorable Akoto Osei did this? And I'm saying this also because in 2018, we had some youth disrupting a meeting you were having in the area. They claim you had not fulfilled the promises made to them.
Well, let me start with the latter. The issue about the youth claiming that is false. In fact, all those people that came, 3 or 4 people that came to that meeting, were people. In fact, the irony is that they rode on motorcycles that I had bought for them to use for the campaign. That's the irony of the whole thing. I think it was a group of people who were trying to engineer. They subsequently regretted, but I leave it up to them. I think that if I have not done anything for the people before 4 terms, in the last 3 unopposed, it's a lot. For me, the biggest thing is the skills vocational training institute that I helped set up, Wealth Creation and Social Development Center, which trains mostly young women, but a few young men on hairdressing, cooking, and so forth and so on. And this has been ongoing since 2006. And every year we graduate quite a few of them, 80 to 100. You think about for the last 2006 to now.
Okay.
Quite a few young ladies, in particular, have come out of there. Now they are working on their own jobs, and that always makes me happy.
All right. I'm sure we'll have another conversation, a lengthier one, I hope, about your time in Parliament and also what you've done for the people for Old Tafo. But thank you very much for joining us on the Voters Diary.
Thank you so much.
That's the Honorable Anthony Akoto Osei. He's the MP for Old Tafo constituency in the Ashanti region and also the Minister for Monitoring and Evaluation. Sami is still here in the studio with me. Sami, so you were telling us about how he entered Parliament. Of course, he's spoken about his achievements and all that. But what other roles did he play? When the MPP was in opposition, what was he about?
He was a go-to person when it comes to issues of finance. You know, he was more of like the minority spokesperson on finance when the party was in opposition. So anytime there was a budget reading by the then finance minister, Setekpe, anytime the minority then will have or address a press conference, he's the person who will normally address the press and explain some of the things the minister said in the budget, some few rejections and some few opposition when it comes to those things. So he was a go-to person when it comes to issues of finance in Parliament because of his background when it comes to econs and
and finance issues. So he was a go-to person anytime it comes to finance issues in Parliament. He also served on the Committee of Defence and Interior. Then time when the party was, or the MPP was in opposition. So he was serving on these two particular positions. And when the President Kufuor became president in 2017, he was appointed as a minister in charge of monitoring and evaluation. His work basically was to oversee the activities of ministers when it comes to the implementation of the government's policy statement or agenda. Remember in 2018 or 2019, there was an assessment of ministers and their performance, and where a report was prepared by him and given to the president on what they have achieved in office. So there were some key priority areas the president was looking at. The ministers, met all those areas and so he prepared a report, presented to the parliament, and it was to this report that there was a reshuffle when the president did his first reshuffle based on this report. So he'll be well remembered in the government and in parliament after his exit. From the party side, too, because of his finance background, he was more or less a member of the finance committee of the party. Anytime the party needed to do anything finance or fundraising or anything, he was an active member of the party in that area as well.
And he will not be contested, as we know. But who will be going for the NPP in? So
when he leaves, a young gentleman by name Vincent Eko Asafua, who happens to be the person who will replace him. He's currently the public relations officer at the Education Ministry. He was a former president of the Association of Service Personnel and a former party communicator. So he comes in to replace Doc in the Tafo constituency.
Thank you, Sammy. Let me take a couple of your messages as we wrap up today's edition of the Voters Diary. Bright Ayensuya says the discussions going on are a full semester course I pursued at the University of Education, Winneba, and the public is enjoying it for free. Thank you. We are glad you are listening. Dwayne in London says great analysis, really enjoying the program. Kofi Apiaje from Asinfusu, I'm enjoying your program, very educative, keep it up. Fred, you didn't tell us where you are writing to us from, but your message reads, Team City, you people are doing very well. And okay, Michael from Kwashiman says the program is very educative. Francis, good afternoon, City FM. You've made me learn a lot today about politics. In fact, you guys are doing a great job. And Joshua Ajololo in Accra says, I'm seriously enjoying this program. So these prominent persons you mentioned started from somewhere. Of course, everybody started from somewhere, Joshua. But thank you very much. There's a message also from Prince in Medina, and he says City FM always setting the standard for others to follow. Thank you for listening to the Voters Diary. My name is Abna Nyamechampedu. This afternoon, we began the show by telling you how Ghana's parliament has evolved. Bernard and Nathan were here with some deep analysis on that front. We'll continue tomorrow. And we also spoke to the Honorable Anthony Akoto Osei. He's the MP for Old Tafo. He's exiting Parliament, and we are getting to understand how these people have contributed to the development of Ghana's Parliament, their experiences, what they have been so far. We spoke to him as well. There will be more on the show tomorrow. The Voters Diary was live on 97.3 City FM. It was also live on our affiliates across the country. Holy 98.5 FM in Aplau, K2 South in the Volta region, Revival 99.3 FM in Tajevu. In the Central region, we were live on Bosome 89.1 FM at Kim Swedro. Bono region, Greener FM and 95.9 in Sunyai. Also in the Ashanti region, we were live on Focus FM, KNUST campus 94.3 and Ajimpa 99.9 FM, all in Kumasi. There'll be a playback of the Voters Diary this evening on 97.3 FM at 10 p.m. So if you tuned in late, make sure you tune in at 10 p.m. and catch a repeat broadcast of today's edition of the Voters Diary. My name is Abnanya Mechampedu. The show was produced by Hawa Idrisu and Fred Jabano. Thank you so much for your time, and keep listening to 97.3 City FM. It's time for the news at 2, and 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 it's time for the news